I just ordered and received 2 Mi Band 10s, and today we're gonna systematically and scientifically test them to find out how good the heart rate tracking and the sleep state tracking is of these cheap Xiaomi watches. By the way, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. Now this video is gonna be a bit different from my normal ones in 2 ways. First of all, this is going to be an initial test, just a few exercises, 1 or 2 nights of sleep maximum, just to get an initial impression of how well these watches can track your heart rate and your sleep. And second, we're going to together go on the journey to install these watches, see if we can actually get to the data, because that's one problem with Xiaomi devices. Often it's very hard to actually get to the raw data and do the analyses I like to do. So maybe we'll have a lot of trouble and you'll have the same frustrations as me, but you'll also be informed that it's hard to actually sometimes get to this data. Now to get started, we need to unbox them and connect them to 2 different phones and 2 different Xiaomi accounts. So let's do that. So I have 2 iPhones here, both with a separate Mi Fitness account, both syncing to both Apple Health, also 2 separate Strava accounts. So there I should be able to get the heart rate data, and this has been an issue in the past. Sometimes for some reason it just doesn't sync. So before I actually tested both a Xiaomi watch and the Xiaomi Smart Band 9 Pro, and only for the Band 9 Pro did I actually get the heart rate data on Strava, and for some reason it just didn't sync at all for the Xiaomi watch. So I'm actually reusing the account I had for the Band 9 Pro, and I created a new account on a new phone for one of the other bands. So both should hopefully now sync to Strava. Let's first quickly unbox both devices. So I actually ordered 2 different colors so we can tell them apart, a white one and a black one. Well, the boxes are simple as always. We have the band and the charger right here, still using the old USB-A. It is what it is. And then we also have our black one right here. Same setup, again, USB type A and the black version. So let's first set up the black one. As always, the bezel is pretty good, so let's set up the black one on my gold iPhone. So that was easy enough, a quick update, and then at the same time we can install the other one. Here we have the white version. So here you can see previously I had the Xiaomi Band 8, 9 Pro and another 9 Pro connected, but we're actually gonna connect a new device. Alright, so both devices are now updating. Let's wait for that to be done. And then we're gonna do a test exercise, just a 5-minute fake exercise to see if the data will sync to Strava. And if that works, it's time to get to the real testing. But now, as always, since I have to wait for those updates to get done, I can make myself a quick coffee and we can enjoy that while we're waiting. Okay, so the update is done, the coffee is ready. Now I'll start 2 fake workouts just to see if that data syncs, so let's do that now. That also means I cannot test the Vivo Active 6 from Garmin for at least today and tomorrow. And I'm actually also testing another device you guys are very interested in, the Amazfit Helios band. So we have the strap of it right here, so this is the strap part. But I'm actually gonna be able to wear it at the same time because I hacked that together by using the Whoop Strap 4.0 biceps. I don't know what you call these things, like a bicep sleeve or something. So I'll be wearing that as well for the coming weeks. In addition to a second Helios band I'll be wearing on my wrist. And then we'll also do that review in a week or 2. I'm very excited about this one. This could be a Whoop replacement without a subscription, so wait for that as well. If you're interested, subscribe to the channel. But for now, of course, the next 2 days we're gonna focus on the Xiaomi Mi Band 10. Let's first try an indoor workout because sometimes those don't sync to Strava. There's some weird things going on. Again, you have to wear the device a bit away from the wrist, so that should be okay. So we'll go. And also for the second device, same information. Let's go. Okay, so we'll wait 5 minutes or so. You can see the heart rate is not even being detected yet. I don't know if you can see the screen right now. So as you can see, it's not detecting my heart rate yet, which is weird. Let's see if my heart rate will pop up. Yes, 76, 73, which is reasonable, I would say. And for the other Mi Band, will the heart rate pop up? 96, that's probably a bit too high.
5 minutes later.
Okay, so we're 5 minutes in the moment of truth. Let's stop both the watches, so the black one and the white one. Okay, one worked, the other one worked as well. Where's Strava? Here we go. Activities. No Strava string, no no Strava sync. Let's try again. So we did a freestyle workout. It recorded my heart rate with the Xiaomi Band 10, but it's not on Strava. Let's reconnect maybe. And we'll be back in another 5 minutes.
One long angry line later.
Alright, we're back 5 minutes later. Let's end the exercise. Whoopsie. Let's check Strava. Yes. Okay, apparently I needed to reconnect Strava, or maybe for some reason it was connected to a different account. All seems to work now. Okay, that's good. All seems to work now. So my plan is to first do maybe an indoor cycling session, then a short weightlifting session, probably chest and triceps. Then I actually have a party to go to, but I'll cycle there, so we'll get some cycling data back and forth. And then, yeah, that's it. Maybe tomorrow I'll go for a run, and then we have a bunch of data to look at. Of course, it's a very initial test, but it will show us for 2 independent Xiaomi Mi Band 10s if they're good at tracking my heart rate. So let's get started. So we'll start with indoor cycling right here, which should be relatively easy for a device to track. So let's see if the Xiaomi Mi Band 10 can track my heart rate during indoor cycling. Okay, that was quite an intense workout. Just looking at my wrist a few times, checking the Mi Band 10's heart rate, and I compared that to the chest strap by Garmin. Actually, that looked very similar. So that looks good at a first glance, but we're actually going to do formal analysis and do some coding on my computer now. Just one thing I want to mention. For some reason, Garmin always gives me a way too high VO2 max. So it says I have a VO2 max of 68, which is way below what I actually have. I have a VO2 max of 58 according to my last measurement. But that's a side note. Usually the Garmin can measure my heart rate quite accurately, but we're going to use the Polar H10 as a reference in this case. But from what I've seen, basically whatever chest strap you get a good heart rate. So use the chest strap by Polar as a reference and see how good the Mi Band 10 actually did. Okay, the results are in for indoor cycling and the results are looking surprisingly good. Now in this plot you see the overview for the Mi Band 10 worn on my left wrist, with along the horizontal axis the reference device, so the Polar H10 chest strap, and along the vertical axis the Mi Band 10, where each dot is a matching measurement between the two of them. And if they would perfectly agree, all values should be along this blue line right here. And as you can see, almost all points are on or at least super close to the blue line. And for such a cheap device as the Mi Band, this is really good. We can actually quantify this agreement with a correlation, this R value up here, which is 0.99 for the one on my left wrist. So super good. I'm really happy with this. And we can look at this same thing for the device on my right wrist, and those results are right here. Now they're not identical. There's this little bit of deviation right here. But overall, again, a correlation of 0.99, which is really good, and almost all points on or close to the blue line. Now let's take a look at the individual sessions to see why there's still a bit of deviations, but this result really surprises me so far. Along the horizontal axis we have the clock time and my heart rate along the vertical axis, with in blue-green the reference device and the Mi Band 10 from my left wrist in red. And the red line and the blue line basically overlap perfectly. Like there's a little bit of deviation here in the beginning, and maybe sometimes in the lower heart rate range a tiny bit of deviation. But overall, definitely good enough performance. And if we look at the one on my right wrist, this is more or less the same, so a very good agreement. Only in this moment right here, they detect a slightly too high heart rate, but just for a little bit. Overall, this is really good and good enough for me. And we can actually put these results into the context of many of the other devices I've tested before. And those results are displayed right here. So that correlation value we're looking at before is along the horizontal axis. And on the vertical axis, I ordered the watches from worst on the bottom to best on top. So the further to the right and the higher device is, the better is its agreement with the reference device. And here I marked the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist in red. And we'll zoom in a bit in a moment so you can also see where the one on my right wrist is. And here we have that zoomed in view. So these are just the devices with a correlation of 0.9 or higher, so some of the better devices. With again, the one on my left wrist marked in red right here. and the one on my right wrist right here. So they're super close to each other. And among some of the better devices out there, they're really doing well. Now, this is a very limited initial test, so just a single spinning session. But the fact that both of them performed really well is at least promising. So overall, I'm quite surprised and really happy with this. Let's see if we can see some of the other Mi Bands in this overview. So we have the Mi Band 8 right here, so quite a bit worse. Again, I will probably have done more testing with that one. And the Mi Band 9 is it in this overview. And indeed, the Mi Band 9 also didn't do that poorly. It's right here, so also quite close to the Mi Band 10. So I would say the Mi Band 10 might be doing a tiny bit better than the Mi Band 9, but overall really good performance. But let's next take a look at a much harder exercise for this device to track weightlifting. Well, for any device to track. So with weightlifting, there's a lot of tension on your arms, and this makes it very hard for any tracker out there to accurately track your heart rate on the wrist. So let's do that now. Afterwards, we'll take a look at cycling outside. I actually need to fix one of my bikes back there. We'll fix that and then go for cycling, but let's first do a weightlifting session. And here we have a similar overview to before, but now for weightlifting, with again the reference device along the horizontal axis and the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist along the vertical axis. And we do see a typical pattern, I would say. So in the lower heart rate range, almost all points are on or at least super close to the blue line. So there the measurements are okay. But here in the higher heart rate range, there are many points below the blue line, indicating that in these moments, the Mi Band 10 detected a too low heart rate. Now, this generally means that when I have a peak in my heart rate, so there's a lot of tension on my arm, the Mi Band 10 cannot detect my heart rate accurately. But let's now take a look at the one on my right wrist. And here we have those results. And these are mostly the same, though even a little bit better. There are more points in the higher heart rate range close to the blue line, though we still see many points below the blue line right here. The correlation value, that value we were looking at before, is now 0.92 for the one on my right wrist and 0.89 for the one on my left wrist. And this is actually quite decent compared to the competition. But let's first take a look at the individual session and then we'll compare to the competition. And here are the results for the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist, with again the Mi Band 10 in red and the reference device in blue-green. Now, each time I did a set of exercises, my heart rate showed a peak, and you can see that clearly by these blue lines right here. And it is pretty obvious that the Mi Band 10 often couldn't fully detect the peaks in my heart rate, at least for the one on my left wrist. And if we look at the results for the one on my right wrist, these are potentially a bit better. Some of the peaks were detected, I would say these two, so this one right here, and also this first one actually were more or less fully detected, but many peaks were also missed. So I wouldn't say this is good enough. But compared to the competition, this actually isn't that bad. So let's take a look at that. And here we have those results. So a similar overview to before, where we want the devices to be as far to the top right as possible, with the Mi Band 10 on my right wrist marked in red right here. So with that correlation of 0.92, it's actually pretty decent among some of the better devices out there. And if we zoom in a bit, we can read those labels even better. These are all devices with a correlation of 0.7 or higher. And here we have the Mi Band 10 on my right wrist. And a little bit below that right here is the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist. And they're super close actually, so more or less giving a similar result. I do see some difference sometimes in performance for devices on my left and right wrist, where actually in general my left wrist seems to be a bit easier. For the Mi Band, I cannot see any difference so far. And with this correlation, it is among some of the better devices out there, maybe doing about as well as many Huawei devices. Not quite as good as Apple Watches. These are some of the best devices out there for heart rate tracking. But for the price, this is honestly really good. I'm not disappointed with this. Now for weightlifting, I still wouldn't use it. I generally wouldn't use any device on the wrist except for maybe the Apple Watch. But if you want to track your heart rate during weightlifting, I really recommend using a chest strap. But let's next take a look at cycling. That will be the most important test to do, because that's quite a bit harder than cycling indoors and also quite important for many people, but not quite as hard as weightlifting. But before doing that, I actually need to fix one of my bikes. So I have a bunch of bikes right here. I actually have a few more bikes. I actually need to fix the tension on the spokes of the back wheel right here. I already partially fixed it before, but there's still a small issue. I need to replace the pedals right there, and then hopefully it'll be ready to ride. I actually used that bike for many years from my road biking. My friends had all these fancy bikes and I was still on my old steel bike with frame shifters. It still worked. It was a bit of a challenge keeping up with them, but good for my fitness. I now have a somewhat newer bike, still from the 2000s, I think. Let me quickly show you that one. This is actually my current road bike right here. It's from the early 2000s, I think. Back then it was an amazing bike, but it's still mostly aluminium. So if there are any bike brands out there who want to sponsor me, I'm a really keen cyclist. I cycle a lot, but on quite old bikes, and I'm happy to try out some carbon bikes sometimes. Decathlon, for instance, I send you a message. I love your Van Rysel stuff. I have a lot of your kit. So if you ever want to have me try one of your bikes, I'd love to, but I'd be happy with any brand that produces quality carbon frames. Alright, I'm back from my bike rides. I already analyzed the data and it's super interesting. There were just 2 short bike rides, both about 30-35 minutes or so. But the data is pretty clear, I would say. And with 2 watches, we basically have 4 rides to look at. So let's take a look. And sorry I'm not wearing a shirt in some of this video, but it's about 27 degrees Celsius now in my room. Way too hot for me. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit. Alex can put it here, but let's take a look at the data. Now, instead of jumping straight to the correlations, I first want to take a look at the bike rides themselves. This is the first ride right here with the reference in blue-green and the Mi Band 10 worn on my right wrist in red. And this looks really good, honestly. The Mi Band 10 mostly was able to follow along with the changes in my heart rate. Yes, some of the details are missing, but overall looking pretty good. This would be good enough for me. And let's now take a look at this same ride, but now for the one on my left wrist. And those results are right here. Also looking pretty good. It makes some different mistakes, but overall more or less the same performance, I would say. And the second bike ride actually looks a lot worse for the one on my right wrist. Still not as bad as we've seen for some devices. We see quite some deviation, especially here in the first half of the ride. We can see that the red line is sometimes too high, like right here, for instance, or right here, and sometimes too low, like right here. But the one I wore on my left wrist actually did a bit better for this ride. This is much closer to reality. So this again would be good enough for me. But let's now take a look at those correlations. And let's start with the Mi Band 10 I wore on my right wrist, because that showed worse performance for the second ride. And here we have an overview of those results, which still have a pretty decent correlation at 0.91, which is much better than many devices out there. And generally most points are close to the blue line, though as we can see here in the lower heart rate range, it's sometimes detected a too high heart rate, and in the higher heart rate range, it's sometimes detected a too low heart rate. And this is related to what we saw for that first half of the second session, where it sometimes had a too high and sometimes too low heart rate. But overall still not that bad. And if we take a look at the one I wore on my left wrist, we have even better results. The correlation is now really good at 0.96, and most points are on or at least close to the blue line. And given the price point of this device, which is probably around 50 bucks or so, but depending on when you buy it, it might be even cheaper. That's just really good. Now, there are some reasons why it might be performing well. One of them is, for instance, the temperature outside. As you saw, it's pretty hot inside, now 27.4 degrees, and that's because it's hot outside. And potentially that increased temperature leads to better blood flow through my arms, and therefore an easier signal for the device to pick up on. I don't know if this is really the case. This is something I really want to investigate at some point. See if there's some kind of association between the performance of a device and the temperature outside. But overall, this looks pretty good, but let's put this in the context of many other devices out there. And you can see that in this overview right here, and you're familiar with this kind of overview by now. So we want the devices to be as far to the top right as possible. And here I marked the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist in red, and it's not that far from the Mi Band 10 on my right wrist, which is right here. This is a bit difficult to read, but I just want to emphasize how far to the top right these devices are, at least based on this very initial test. They're doing quite well compared to the competition, but let's zoom in a bit so we can read those labels better. And that zoomed in view is displayed right here, so these are just the devices with a correlation of 0.8 or higher, with the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist marked in red right here, and a little bit lower we have the Mi Band 10 on my right wrist. But both are honestly doing quite well. They're doing about as well as, for instance, the Fitbit Charge 6, which is another smaller device, the Huawei Watch Fit 3 and the Huawei Watch Fit 4, both of which are quite good heart rate trackers as well. I have more data for those two than I have for the Mi Band 10, so I need to do more testing in the future. But this initial test looks really good. It's not quite as good as the Pixel Watch 3 and also different Apple Watches. These are really still the best heart rate trackers out there. But for the price, I'm honestly quite impressed. So far that performance in terms of heart rate tracking is pretty good for the price. Now this is an initial test, but it's at least a good indicator of what the device might be able to do. There's still one exercise we need to check though, and that's running, and I always use the Runner app for that, but more on that later. I'll do the running test tomorrow because I really need some sleep. It's already quite late, and I already did quite a few exercises today. So we'll do that tomorrow, and also take a look at the consistency of the sleep stage tracking of the two Mi Band 10s, because they should be tracking the same sleep stages. If not, then they're likely not very reliable. And we'll also see if we can compare it to an EEG device that actually measures my brain waves. But with one night it can sometimes go wrong. And I'll give the word now to Tomorrow Rob. So I slept my first night with the two Mi Band 10s, and the results are not great at first glance at least. So I can put the two sleep stages side by side. So this is one of the two devices, and if I put the other side by side, there's actually a big discrepancy between the two. The moment I woke up is more or less similar, but otherwise they don't appear to be much the same. So I'm actually gonna try also to do some kind of formal analysis, but it's actually hard to get this data out. I'm gonna have to manually put it in some Excel sheet, and then hopefully the data quality of my EEG is good enough as well. So I'm gonna have a look at that as well. But first I wanna go for a run because it's already heating up. It's already about 27 degrees Celsius again in my room here, and actually my working room it's even hotter. And we don't have aircon here in Europe. So we're gonna go for a quick run before it gets too hot. Then we're gonna take a look at that data. And after that, we're gonna do a more formal analysis on the sleep stage data to see if they're consistent between the two watches and if they agree well with the EEG, if that data quality is good enough. But first we're gonna go on that run. Well, first a coffee and then we're gonna go on that run. But I'm actually not a runner by training. I'm a cyclist by training. I've been cycling for about 15 years or so for sports and my whole life just for commuting. And for running, I've always struggled to make my running plans. And that's where Runna comes in. I affiliate with Runna. Runna is the best running coach app out there. So it will make your whole running plan for you if you have a certain goal, or if in general you're just looking to get into running. And during the run, for instance, on your Garmin device or your phone, it will show you your pace and if that pace is in the range or if you should speed up or slow down. I really love it. It's changed the way I run in a very positive sense. It gives me sort of a sense that I actually know what I'm doing, because before I would start way too fast, way too much, because I'm generally fit because of cycling, and then for running I would always get injured, and it's now a lot better. So after my coffee we're gonna go on that run together with Runna and analyze that data. I'll try a bit of multitasking and stretch at the same time. So during the run I was looking at the watch and also at my reference, and they seemed to be kind of okay. There was one moment where I saw some deviation, but maybe that was just a very momentary difference. All the analysis are running now, so I can show you. So all the analysis for the heart rate are running right there. I'm doing some analysis for the sleep staging right there. Once I'm done stretching, we'll look at the results together. And the running results actually look really good. So this is the one on my left wrist right here. And you can see that the red line of the Mi Band 10 overlaps almost perfectly, honestly, with the blue-green line of the reference device. So here I have nothing to complain about. Let's take a look at the other one. So the one on my right wrist is also basically perfect. There are some small deviations, but this is so minor, I would have nothing to complain about here. Here in the beginning, you can see that when I started it, it needed a moment to catch my heart rate. But this is only a few seconds, and after that it's basically perfect. But let's put a number on this. Let's calculate that correlation and look at that correlation plot. And here we have that correlation plot for the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist. And the correlation is more or less perfect. So a rounded correlation of 1.00. And given that the correlation cannot be higher than 1.00 is close to perfect. There are still tiny deviations, but this is really as good as it gets usually. But let's take a look at the one on my right wrist. This is also basically perfect. We see that in the beginning it needed a second to catch up on my heart rate. That's why for a few of the measurements the heart rate was too low. But after that, again, super close to the blue line. Not many watches that I've seen perform better than this device. But let's take a look at that in a more detailed way by looking at the performance of many devices I've tested in the past. And here we have that overview where again we want the devices to be as far to the top right as possible. And we have the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist marked in red right here. And the one on my right wrist is actually very close. It's right here. So about 5 devices down or so. But they're both among some of the best devices out there. And I honestly didn't expect this beforehand. I don't know if the current weather conditions and if the way I ran, as in not too many intervals, somehow benefited this performance. But overall, this looks really good. And we also saw for the other exercises that it did quite well. But let's zoom in a bit so we can read those labels better. And here we have the zoomed in view, in this case, just the devices with a correlation of 0.9 or higher. And the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist is the best performer out of all devices I've tested. Now again, this is for a single run under sunny conditions, but still very good. And the one on my right wrist basically performed the same. So we at least have one replicate measurement on both of my wrists. I'm a bit afraid, but I don't think this is the case, that maybe the Mi Band 10 is searching for Bluetooth signals of heart rate and picking up on them and using them without letting me know. I don't think this is really the case. That could be the one deviant explanation for why it's doing so well. But assuming that's not the case, it's doing really well. And the heart rate monitor within the Mi Band is able to measure my heart rate quite well. And for the price, this is basically the best device out there. The only close contender is the Huawei Band. So for instance, the Huawei Band 9 did quite well on me for running, about the same as the Mi Band 10. So both of these are quite cheap devices. With the Huawei Band, you get a bit of a bigger screen, but otherwise I'm really content with the Mi Band 10. It's doing about the same as, for instance, the Whoop MG that I wear on my biceps, or different Apple Watches. Now I'll do more testing. I hope to also give it to Rafael for some testing, or maybe somebody else to independently test if the Mi Band 10 is good at heart rate tracking. But this is a good first indication. I don't know what you think. I didn't expect this. Maybe you have different experience with it. I actually want to look at the sensor of the Mi Band 10 at some point and compare it to the previous Mi Bands. I didn't do much running before, so I didn't do a lot of testing with older Mi Bands for running. But as a first indication, this is very good. So those are really surprisingly good results. I now want to take a look at the sleep stage tracking, but that's going to take me some time to both process the data, actually get the data into my computer. It's going to be a lot of manual work. We're going to do that analysis. First I have to eat something, but then I'll get back to you. I analyzed all the sleep data, and we're going to start by looking at how the Mi Band 10 performed compared to the reference device I have, which is the Z-Max EEG headband, which can actually measure my brain waves and is specifically designed for sleep tracking. And here you can see how the Mi Band 10, the black version, compares to that reference device. With the sleep stages is measured by the reference device on top, and those according to the Mi Band 10 on my left wrist here on the left. Now each column here sums to 100%. Meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the sleep stages according to the reference was detected as a sleep stage by the Mi Band 10. And if they would perfectly agree, all values along the diagonal here should be 100%. Now I should mention two things here. There were some small data issues with the reference device, mostly leading to more awake moments, so we're going to ignore the awake column right here. And second, this is just for one night, so we cannot draw any definitive conclusions, but I do think the patterns are pretty clear. Now, first of all, for this Mi Band, the deep sleep agreement was pretty good at about 90%. However, the light sleep agreement and the REM sleep agreement both aren't very good at about 50% agreement. And instead, a lot of it was either predicted as light sleep in the case of REM, or as deep sleep or REM sleep in the case of light sleep. So not looking that good, honestly. But what is even more surprising and worrying in a way is how much worse the other Mi Band performed. So that's this one right here. This is the Mi Band on my right wrist. We have pretty poor deep sleep agreement where much of it was detected as light sleep instead. Again, otherwise being predicted as deep sleep or REM sleep, and also really bad REM sleep agreement. And the fact that one agrees a bit better with the reference than the other also means that the two amongst themselves likely don't agree very well. And I want to show you that by just looking at the nights themselves. And here we have the actual night of data with the reference device on top. So with the clock time along the horizontal axis and the sleep stages on the vertical axis. And on the bottom a similar plot, but now for the Mi Band 10. And as you can see, the agreement isn't that great, honestly. So in percentages, we saw that a lot of the deep sleep detected by the EEG device was also detected by the Mi Band 10. There are 3 main deep sleep segments, and all of these were more or less detected by the Mi Band 10. But a lot of extra deep sleep is detected all throughout the night, and this isn't very realistic. And also the REM sleep is just randomly spread out throughout the night. Normally you go through sleep cycles, each one ending in REM sleep. So I likely had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sleep cycles. And you can clearly see this based on the EEG device. So there's some deep sleep and light sleep followed by REM, deep sleep and light sleep followed by REM, deep sleep, light sleep followed by REM, etc., etc. And you just cannot see this based on the Mi Band 10 data. And if you look at the other Mi Band 10, so the one on my right wrist, we see a very different pattern. So again, it's not good and very different. So there's much less deep sleep here in the beginning of the night. Also, the time I fell asleep is a bit shifted. Now, this shift I actually allow for, so I allow in my script for it to find the best match between the reference data and the Mi Band 10 by shifting plus or minus 15 minutes, because there will always be some discrepancies. And with the best fit that it found, it really doesn't agree very well with the EEG device. So it detects a lot of deep sleep near the end of the night, where I normally have very little deep sleep. And also the REM sleep just agrees very poorly with the EEG device. So overall, I'm not very happy with this performance. And I can actually show you that there are many devices that perform better. And you can actually see that in this overview right here. So this is the performance in terms of sleep stage tracking for all the devices I've tested in the past, or many of them at least, where the further to the right and the higher device is, the better is its agreement with the reference device. So if the average agreement over the individual sleep stages along the horizontal axis, and the worst sleep stage agreement along the vertical axis. Now, I actually didn't plot the Mi Band 10 in this overview yet, but we can do that. And if we're being very generous, we can take the best agreement right here. So we can calculate the average agreement by summing these three numbers right here and dividing it by 3. So we get 65%. And the worst sleep stage is about 52%. So if we take 65 and the other number was 52, we would end up somewhere around here. So actually doing pretty okay. But as we saw, ending up around here would be a bit over optimistic. If we take the other percentages, so those were these ones right here, we would end up, let's see, with an average agreement of 41% and a worst of 36. So 41 and 36 would be somewhere around here, somewhere around some Huawei devices. A little bit worse than what I had for the Mi Band 9 potentially. And where's the Mi Band 9 Pro right here? So these ended up right here. But we can also take the average of those two results, and that will probably be more fair. And that's where I'll place it for now. Let me quickly calculate that. So if we assume the average is true, we would, over the 3 sleep stages, which is now an average on average, so this is not perfect, I can recalculate for my long-term testing. We would end up with an average of about 53 over the 3 sleep stages. And the worst sleep stage right here would be about 44. So we would have 53 on average and about 44 as the worst sleep stage. If we put these two numbers in that overview right here, we would have 55, so roughly 53 right here, let's say. And then 44 would end up right here somewhere. Maybe a little bit lower. So right here. This is where the Mi Band 10 would end up. We can actually make it readable. Okay, here we are. This is sort of the temporary overview we would end up with. So we have the Mi Band 10 right here, which had a 54% average of average, so not perfect in terms of testing. But if I were to recalculate it, we would mostly end up with the same thing. And then 44% along the other axis. And you can at least see that for this very initial test, it's not that far away from the Mi Band 9, the Mi Band 9 Pro, and the Mi Band 8 actually did quite a lot worse in my testing. This might be a fluke, but all of them are amongst the lower performing devices right here, so not doing very good. The best sleep stage trackers out there are the Apple Watch. If you get any more or less recent version, you'll get pretty good sleep stage tracking. Even with something like the Apple Watch SE from 2022, which you can probably get refurbished for a pretty good deal, and you'll get good heart rate tracking. The 8 Sleep Pod, which is my favorite sleep improvement device. On these hot days, this really helps me sleep a lot better because it can actively heat and cool each side of the bed independently. It's been a godsend for my sleep. It is very expensive though, so only get it if you can really afford it. If you want the best discount possible, my affiliate link is down here or up here, and you'll be supporting the channel at the same time. Then we also have the Oura Ring right here, which is doing pretty well. And finally, there's the Nukua, now called Sleep 2 app, which is specifically designed for sleep tracking. Also pretty good. You'll need an extra device to go with it though, because it's just an app. And then in the second tier of devices, we have different Google and Fitbit devices, which are also pretty good. And you can get some Fitbits for a pretty decent price. And you'll get the same sleep stage tracking, no matter if you have like a very old Fitbit Charge 2 or a newer Fitbit Charge 6 or a Pixel Watch. And finally, there's the Whoop strap, which is one of my favorite all-round devices. I also have an affiliate link for that up here or down here, and you can check out my full review as well. But overall, for sleep stage tracking, the Mi Band 10 isn't amazing. But let's now get to my overall conclusions. Okay, so that was a lot of data on the Mi Band 10, actually 2 Mi Band 10s, and the results are super interesting in my opinion and actually better than I expected. Wait, let me put you down for a second. In terms of heart rate tracking, the Mi Band 10 actually did pretty good, or actually very good, at least for the price point. If you get it for, let's say, 40 or 50 bucks, it's really a good performer, at least based on this initial testing. It's doing a lot better than many quite a bit more expensive devices. Now you get a small screen and it's maybe not the best sort of smartwatch out there, but in terms of heart rate tracking, at least on me, it's doing surprisingly well. I'll also give it to Rafael, my colleague, for testing, or maybe another person, because it would be very interesting to see if these results are replicable on a second person. And of course, this was a very initial test, just doing 1 or 2 of the same exercises. So we need to do many more to see if these results are consistent over a longer time period. But I'm happily surprised, given the price point, and even if the performance is actually a bit worse in reality, you can't really go wrong if you want sort of basic heart rate tracking or maybe even very good heart rate tracking. The sleep stage tracking, on the other hand, I'm not very excited about, but this is sort of what I expected. It would take a lot of money and effort for Xiaomi to create a better sleep stage tracking algorithm. Usually across their entire lineup, a single brand has the same sleep stage tracking algorithm, because you need to create a big data set of reference data and data with the device to actually train that model. So it's actually sort of an AI or machine learning task. You've heard these terms thrown around a lot, and for that you need a lot of reference data or training data. Similar to how, for instance, Google developed their large language models or ChatGPT was developed, you need a lot of training data for that to become a good model, and the same is true for sleep stage tracking. You need a lot of data with both the reference device measurements and the measurements with the actual device you're trying to train for, so that the device itself can actually learn how to predict your sleep stages. And this will always be a relatively difficult task with a decent amount of data required, and I suspect that Xiaomi hasn't collected that type of data. So who's this device for? Well, based on my initial testing, somebody who wants to track their heart rate during their exercises, doesn't care too much about the app, because I don't really like the Mi Fitness app that much compared to some of the competition. I still think, for instance, the Aura Ring or the Whoop strap definitely provide a better app experience with more interpretable data also on your recovery. Both also have much better sleep stage tracking. So if you're interested in your health and sleep tracking, then I wouldn't get the Mi Band. But if you just want heart rate tracking, you want to look at your heart rate during your exercise and see if you're going too hard or not, then it might be a valid choice, and given the price, it's actually not bad. Of course, think about e-waste. Do you actually need this device, or is it better to buy a better device now instead of the cheaper one now and then in half a year upgrading again? But if you don't have a big budget and you are gonna use the device for quite a while, it might actually be a good option, but I'll keep you updated once I do my retesting and my long-term review. Now, if you do decide to get the Mi Band 10, a Whoop strap, an Aura Ring, an H-Sleep pod, another device, or anything at all on Amazon for that matter, even something as small as toilet paper, you want to support the channel and save some money, there are different affiliate links in the description below that give you the best discount possible. If you're into running, I really recommend the Runna app, which creates running plans for you and live coaching during your run. Or if you want to track your glucose levels and want to find out which foods cause big glucose spikes for you personally, I really like the Levels app. Both have an affiliate link down below giving you the best deal possible. Now, given that you watched this whole video on the Mi Band 10, I think you might like this video on the Whoop strap or this video on the Huawei Watch Fit 4 Pro.